So continuing on here, again, the claims of, new scientific theories, and then followed by the claim that all the mad scientists are already working, right? Have already been delegated to work on these new scientific theories, and that they are, of course, right, observing all the results happen before their eyes, right? But anyway, back to, again, who this discussion was originally leveled against, right? So creation scientists, right? So just like we've briefly understood, right, the evolution team and what is going on in their labs, right? We need to understand who creation scientists are, right? What are their scientific operations, etc., etc. So again, I want to start with context, right, to provide as much understanding, as much of the broader picture, right, to understand what's going on here. So to this day, right, when people hear science, scientific evidence, etc., etc., almost everyone defers to the evolution camp, right? Why is this? Right? Is this because of the wonders and innovations that evolution has given us? Not at all. Not even close, actually. See, everything in our existence, right, is pretty much flooded with evolution, right? Everything from pre-K school curriculum all the way to college and university level curriculum, right? It is all controlled by evolution. The sciences, academia, right? Even the media, it's all controlled, right, with evolution. So the point I want to make here is that most people don't even know that creation scientists even exist, right? So of course most people are not going to know that creation scientists work in the same branches of science, right? Just like the evolutionists, right? Genetics, biology, biochemistry, etc., etc. Most people don't know, of course, that some creation scientists are the same credentialed scientists as some evolutionists. Most people, of course, don't know that creation scientists have to conduct the same repeatable, testable, observable, reproducible scientific operations just like the evolutionists. And so of course most people don't know that they are conducting these scientific operations on the exact same evidence as the evolutionists, right? Everything the evolutionists, remember, have borrowed, right? All reality that they have borrowed to develop their so-called scientific model is of course freely available to creation scientists, right? Time, physics, matter, space, the rock layers, the rock formations, the outdoors, nature, chemicals, biology, etc., etc. It's all available to creation scientists, right? So just as a quick aside here, I don't know about the rest of you, right? But when I hear, right, that there is a group of professional scientists that exist outside of the evolution doctrine bubble, right, who can conduct the same scientific operations and are doing so on the exact same evidence as evolutionists, my working brain tells me we should be paying attention to this scientific camp, because what creation scientists have been telling us for over 100 years is that they have also been conducting their scientific operations on the evolution scientific model, and it remains one of the most laughable of all falsified stories. Now remember what's going on here, right? Any professional scientist can conduct scientific operations on any model, right? The evolution model is not exclusive to the evolution camp. Remember that even the terminology, even the term evolution, evolvere, etc., etc., is all reality that predates them, right? So they cannot claim the monopoly on evolutionary science, right, or any science for that matter. They don't own the monopoly on science, right? And again, any professional scientist can conduct, right, their scientific operations on any model put in front of them. This is exactly why creation scientists have been conducting their scientific operations on the evolution model, and it has never been observed. It's literally dead in the water. Now, I know what you're thinking, right? What a ridiculous and almost vitriolic claim to make here, right? Attacking these poor, righteous scientists in the evolution camp, right? And I bet you not one evolutionist knows, you would say, right, that evolution is dead in the water, and where then simultaneously, right, for this timeline, has the evidence then been for this intelligent, conscious, living creator, moral lawgiver of the Bible, right? This guy's out of his mind making such a ridiculous claim. Well, that's an easy question to answer it, and I will answer it, right? But again, I'm going to return to creation scientists because I'm just introducing them here, so we want to get an idea, again, albeit briefly, right, of what they do, right? So, again, creation scientists, who are they and what are their operations, right? Well, creation scientists have no problem admitting that their starting point for their scientific operations is the Bible. Aha, says the atheist. Religion, not science, case closed. This is, of course, foolish and impulsive, right? Let me obviously explain this, right? So, they start off with the Bible, right? So, however, unlike the pompous, arrogant claim made by the evolutionists, or primarily the atheists in the evolution camp, right, that you cannot, quote-unquote, test God in your lab, right, etc., etc., creation scientists, right, remember that creation scientists are Christians, right? They have given their lives to Christ, right? They have been humbled by Christ. So they would never make the absurd God down to a petri dish, right, in their labs and quote-unquote play science with God, right? That kind of stupidity is reserved for blind, stupid chemicals, chemistry, matter, and physics, causing chemical reactions in the minds of atheists, if they want to call that a mind, right? All they had to do was just share what creation scientists have been telling the world, right? So remember I said they're also conducting their scientific operations on the evolution model. The implication there is that there are other scientific operations, right? So creation scientists have told conducting scientific operations on the revealed traits of God revealed in the Bible, right? Primarily intelligent, conscious, living agency, right? So they will take everything in existence. Remember, they're already conducting the same repeatable, testable, observable, reproducible scientific operations, right? On everything from biology, right? Blobs of bacterium, etc., to see if intelligent, conscious, living agency is what is actually observed. Not only who many years ago asked and answered the rhetorical question, how did stupid atoms write their own software? And again, he answered it, and the answer is no one knows, including the atheists of today, right? So this are starting from the Bible. So I will now go to the Bible, right? When it comes to the creation account, right? And just briefly discuss, right, the design, right, and creation of Adam and Eve, right, the first two human beings, right? The Bible tells us that God formed man out of the dust of the ground. Now, quick aside here, anyone can look this up, but it's long been discovered that our bodies are composed of over 60% different dust, dirt particles, things like that, right? Anyone can look this up. So, we are made out of the dust of the ground, right? That's the literal formation, right? You could say the silhouette, right, of the human form, right? Now, obviously, you would also understand that dirt would be something physical, right? That would contain physical properties, right? So this is also the point where, right, our body, our skin, right, our flesh, bone, and as well as our physical organs are designed and created, right? Now, we've heard for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years right now that this is where life is, right? So when, let's say, a scenario where someone, something happens to their health, right, and organs, right, start shutting down, right, or their functionality begins to cease working, right, and eventually that affects the heart, and the heart begins to stop beating. So this person is trying to be revived or resuscitated, right? And these efforts fail, right, to no avail. That this person is not able to be resuscitated or revived, right? We have heard again for thousands and thousands and thousands of years that this person is now clinically, medically, and scientifically pronounced dead, right? This is patently false. And listen to how the Bible obliterated this claim over 5,000 years ago when there was no science or any medical enterprise in existence, right? But again, some context and understanding for this particular part, right? Again, I told you that we would obviously need physical parts and components. The reason for that is because God created his creation within a physical time, space world, right? So our flesh, bones, skin, hair, right? And all the functionality, operability, and inner workings of our organs, right? Heart, liver, kidneys, lungs, right? The blood vessels, the blood highways, the central nervous system, right? All of that was given to us to be able to interact within this physical time. The person that I just described in that scenario, right, that is allegedly clinically, medically, and scientifically dead, is not dead because their physical being has nothing to do with life, right? What that literally means is that that person will no longer be able to interact within the physical time-space world that God created them in, right? They're not going to be able to pick up a hamburger and eat it, right? They're not going to be able to turn a doorknob, right, and push a door open and push it closed, etc., etc., right? All of our physical functionality and physical properties, right, are only so that we can interact within this physical time-space world that we were created in. But it has nothing to do with life. And again, listen to how the Bible revealed this over 5,000 years ago when there was no medical or scientific enterprise. So God finishes forming man, right, Adam, out of the dust of the ground. Then the Bible tells us that God's life, right, aka the breath of life, right, was breathed into Adam's nostrils, and man became a living soul. Now again, life is in the soul, right? But did you catch what I just said, right? Adam's entire physical being and design has been completed, yet Adam has no life, right? There is no functionality, right, and operability in him, right? Right? Again, this is exactly what we have heard for thousands and thousands of years be called life, right? Clinically, medically, and scientifically, and it's not, right? If Adam had life, right, then God would have no reason to breathe the breath of life into Adam's nostrils, right? So physical nostrils, right? And Adam, of course, right, would not become a living soul because he was already living according to the falsehood that we are told, right? But the Bible told us accurately over 5,000 years ago, right, that Adam's design, right, his physical being was completed, right, but he had no life. That's precisely why God deposited his life through Adam's nostrils, and man became a living soul. Okay? Now remember what's entailed here, what's encompassed here, right? We have an intelligent, conscious, living agent, right? So he has foresight, he has foreknowledge, right? He has anticipation. He obviously knew, right, that he was going to design and create Adam first, along with Adam's, reproductive members, right? Reproductive process, right, in his biology, etc., etc. So just fast forwarding here through creation, right? God sees at one point that Adam is alone, and he doesn't literally mean alone, but there's no one else like Adam for Adam to interact with. So he says, I will make him a helpmate. We all know the story here, most of us do, right? God causes a deep sleep over Adam, takes one of his ribs, of course, heals him back up, right? And then he begins, right, the design and creation of Eve. So he completes Eve, right? And she, of course, right, has the same breath of life, right? And again, we have an intelligent, conscious, living agent here, right? So he obviously knew after creating Adam, right, that Eve would be the perfect natural opposite for Adam, right? So she has all of her respective reproductive organs, reproductive biological processes, etc., etc. The Bible tells us that he brings Eve back to Adam, and Adam sees her. And I'm paraphrasing here because the scripture has escaped me at the moment, but I welcome all believers, or anyone for that matter, to look this up and correct me here. But basically, Adam, after seeing Eve, states, "This is now flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone, and she shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man," or taken from man, right? And Adam then proceeds to state, right, therefore shall man grow up, right, become an adult and leave his home, right? We all know this is factual reality, and shall cleave unto his wife, right? Obviously woman, referring to Eve in this case for himself, right? And he finishes stating, therefore what God hath brought together, let no man put asunder. Right? So Adam, obviously with the permission and the knowledge of God, right, has just literally told the world, right, that marriage is not a man-made invention, rather a God creation. Therefore he is the only one who ordains it. He is the only one who chooses, right, who marriage will be assigned to, right? So, right, next part here, continuing on with creation, I'm just going to paraphrase again, right, but God basically then tells Adam and Eve, and by the way, you two are the only ones who can populate the earth. Now, I'm going to stay here with the Bible here, but I want to quickly, I guess, go off tangent here, and I want to quickly speak to members of our LGBT, etc. community, and just remind you to be honest with yourselves, right? To be moral with yourselves, right? If we go back to the first two designed and created beings in existence, excuse me, we can't find two men, right, engaged in same-sex relations, right? They can't populate anything, let alone the earth. We cannot find two women engaged in the same, right? They cannot populate anything, let alone the earth. We're also not going to find a quote-unquote bi person and a trans chameleon horse or cat whisperer person, or whatever the claims are out there, right? This has all been invented. This has all been invented over the last 75 or so years, right? So exactly as the Bible claims, right, that only a man and woman could populate this entire earth, is exactly how this reality has taken place. Now, never mind, of course, that today, right, with the advancements in the medical enterprise and science and all of that, that we, of course, have other means, right, of reproduction, right? But those are, of course, alternative methods, alternative means, and they obviously still cannot violate the original design, right? So again, sticking with creation here and life, right? Adam and Eve are intimate, and at one point Eve bears a child, right? Listen to the words of Eve here, right? So as this human being, right? Let me just quickly give you some context about here, right? So obviously, yes, right? Adam and Eve are intimate, right? Their reproductive process has obviously begun, right? To the point where it is now completed, right? And the conception, the beginning of a human life has begun, because it was human Adam and human Eve, right, who conceived this new human life, right? As this baby is being delivered, right, aka pulled out of Eve, right, and is basically handed to Eve, as you could obviously visualize or imagine, right? Eve, of course, sees, and Adam, of course, see that this baby's reproductive members, right, match those of Adam. And that's precisely why explicitly Eve herself declares, God hath blessed me with a man, right? She has another child as well, who is also a boy, right? Has the same reproductive organs, right, as Adam and the first child, right? So there are now 3 men in existence and 1 woman. Now the point I want to make here with this, right, and I'm actually almost done with this video. There will be a part 2, as I stated, I think previously. The point I wanted to make here with this, notice that, again, as this baby is being delivered, right, to Eve, right, it's being handed to her, right, Adam and Eve are simply using their God-given working brain, right, their God-given moral data, right, aka telling the truth to each other, right, and they again explicitly share the reality, right, that these babies already are born with, aka that they observe. So this eviscerates any and all false claims that we hear of today, that things like biology, gender, and these quote-unquote, sexual identifiers are invented, assigned, right? They are just made up, and they are spoon force fed down the throat of human life. This is patently false and really comical if you think about it, but it is also evil, because we have an original factual design, right? So again, these are the scientific operations of creation scientists, right? Taking all existing reality, right, to see, right, if intelligent, conscious, living agency is observed in everything. And it plainly is, right? No one today could make the claim that everything we see around us got here from blind, mindless, stupid, foresightless, right, inorganic, lifeless, non-knowing, non-caring, pitiless, indifferent chemical processes causing chemical reactions between chemistry, matter, physics, mutations, selections, eons of time, and all the rescue devices, right? Why? Because not only would that individual's working mind compute for them that is laughable, right? That's absurd. But their conscience, aka our inbuilt moral compass. Remember, we're made in the image of morality. We are made in the image of God, right? So that image, right, is imprinted, right, in the very fibers of our being, right? And we have a functionality that, of course, always points us to telling the truth, right? And advising us and warning us about what is sin and evil, right? So our conscience would tell this person, right? The conscience of this person would tell them this would obviously be a lie. Why? Because they would be reducing the intelligent, conscious, living agency of human beings, right? Who have come up with these innovative concepts and ideas, right? To give us all of the realities that we have today. We'd be reducing that down to basically brain dead zombies, right? So I'm going to just quickly end here, but I want to return to what the second video is going to be about. So remember, I told you that this starts off with two falsehoods, two lies that the evolution camp has been telling the world, right? And I've just finished explaining the first one, right? The charge they level against creation scientists, right? So I will continue with the second falsehood in the second video. Now, if you guys haven't, of course, figured out by now, I am a Bible believing, following, and adhering born-again Christian, right? And this video, first and foremost, is to point people to Christ, right? Christ himself, right, said, take up your cross and follow me. Now, what he meant by cross, right, is take up your life as it is and follow me, right? The genius, right, omniscient, right, all-knowing living God would never point us to fallible, sinful, mistake and error-prone beings, right? He would never do that. That's why he said, take up your cross and follow me, right? So this video is to point people to Christ, right? And again, I encourage you to listen to this, to study it, right? And as you are doing so, pay attention to the voice of God, because he is calling out, right? And he's been waiting with open arms for you to give him an opportunity since he created you. So stay tuned for the next video, and thank you everyone for listening and for giving this video any kind of time and attention.